Hi all. I had an interesting game last night against R.Lancaster, who's currently about ECF 165, but apparently about 20 years ago was over 190. So he's just come back into the game like in the last 2-3 years, and he's steadily been rising in ECF rating. So Watford 2 actually demolished our first team last night. They had basically great consistency all the way down to board 5. It was like playing a team of 170s in effect all the way down. So we just pulled out with 2 draws and 2 losses at this stage, with 1 game for a German to adjudication. So anyway, I was white against Roger and I played e4 and he played the French. After d4, d5, I played actually knight d2, and to be honest, I'm not sure I should have played this move without really knowing a good system against c5, which he played. I was hoping actually for knight f6 because I prefer the closed nature of this position, with various options, kind of like this. And as you know, I had a good win earlier in the season in the Hearts League against the WIM. I just like it when white has this nice pawn chain and the fixed centre. When it's more fluid, when black plays c5, that's a very good system. And I think historically the Karpov-Korchnoi matches had a lot of these Tarrasch's, with black often accepting the isolated queen's pawn, but black gets a lot of piece activity. I played e takes d5, and here there are 2 main variations. So e takes d5, which is like the isolated queen pawn variations. Black's accepting that IQP, but there's also the more active, not more active variation, the more solid variation, let's call it, with queen takes d5. So black is temporarily, letting the queen be kicked around, but will have a very solid structure. By removing that d pawn, black will have pressure on the semi-open d file later, and this solid structure with the rest of the pawns. And often, I've seen games of Spielmann where this queen's bishop has become very useful. Later coming to b7, and this bishop also maybe coming to d6, and white's often put under great pressure on the king side. And it was that kind of nightmare scenario I didn't really relish. After knight Gf3, knight f6, I thought he had played in an accuracy actually with knight f6. I thought maybe he should have played c takes d4, which and then you sort of attack the queen. The queen goes back. I'm not the greatest theoretician here, but basically white's going to regain d4. So this regaining d4, and then again there's 2 major options for black in this position. After knight takes d4, or rather for white, 2 main options for white: either queen takes d4 or knight takes d4. But I don't really like these positions. I think black's quite solid, so that's why I need a system here. But what he played was actually, I thought I was going to pounce on inaccuracy because he played knight f6. So he allows me to attack his queen. Now the queen goes to d6, but rather than castle and then allow c takes d4, I thought, why don't I do d takes c5 here? So I don't have to seemingly waste time collecting my d pawn. So he played queen takes c5, and now I thought, black's pieces are not that greatly developed, and my minor pieces, I've got 3 of them out to black's 1. So why don't I try and accelerate my development here? So I came up with the move b4, and one of the points, queen takes b4, rook b1. Now say he goes to c5, I would have been pleased with this because rook b5, and now I could get my rook swung across. And I thought that would be annoying for black to have this rook, parked on g3 here. It's an interesting position. Let's follow, Rivka line, bishop b4, say a castle. I think that would be a bit scary for black to castle into this, because bishop b2, even though Rybka thinks black's got an advantage here. I don't know. Looks, with these things pointed at the black king position, I'm not sure this is that great. But apparently, you know, black's okay. E5. You know, maybe the attack's nothing special. The rook's a bit misplaced, perhaps. One of the problems, you see, I mean, this knight is kind of passive and tied down to defending that bishop, so white's going to have to lose time. Otherwise, you know, queen C1 or D2 would have been useful to try and, you know, play like rook takes H6. So white's position isn't ideally set up. Even though the pieces are out, they're not very harmonious and coordinated. So let's go back. This B4, Queen C7 was played. He didn't dare take the pawn. And now I offer the pawn again. I should have maybe just played A3. But Rybka thinks this is nothing to write home about this position. This is almost dead equal, 0.11. So black's does seem very solid. This is a kind of example variation again. So there's nothing really special here, because black's got nice dark square pressure and control of C5. I kind of like black's position, actually. It's doesn't seem to be anything wrong with it at all. Knight C4, bishop C5. How does white arrange anything? So basically, I do make things worse. I just sack the B pawn, but it's interesting because now I thought, do I just castle or do I take the opportunity to play bishop F6? The problem with bishop F6, as we'll see in the game, is black doesn't have to try an even castle queen side, let alone king side. I thought my lead in development might be worth something here, but it's not really. So we'll see. Bishop takes F6, G takes F6. I castle, and here he plays bishop D7, and that's a very good move. Not only is he doing something about his you know, passive bishop, by coming to that diagonal, my king's going to be under fire, especially when the rooks start coordinating, or this rook, you know, eventually gets to this position. So we're building up here for a nightmare scenario for white. I play rook B1, and I did have the hope that he'd maybe move his bishop to E7. If he moves his bishop to E7, then I have knight D4, and Rybka confirms knight D4 is an annoying move for black. So if black had any plan of castling queenside here with knight C6 and castles queenside, then that's interrupted here rudely with knight B5. So what would black do here? Well, apparently there's queen F4. Okay, G3, say, rook G8, king H1, queen goes back. Can white do anything with the initiative here? Say queen H5, rook G7. Seems to be another case of vanishing compensation. So I wonder why this kind of position, it doesn't seem to have much initiative for white right from the opening. I think it might stem from this knight being on D2. It's slightly passive. But funny enough, he took the knight now on D2. Rybka doesn't think of that as a very good move. In fact, it loses a lot of black's small advantage to be just minus 0.11 now. So I take with the knight, and he plays king E7. Now apparently here I have a small advantage, but it's difficult to see the compensation. There has to be some strong arguments here. Now one of the fascinating moves which Rybka comes up with is queen G4. So if we have a brief look at queen G4, say knight C6. Now here, believe it or not, knight E4, just seemingly allowing knight E5, forking bishop and queen. But there's a vulnerability in the black position. So this is what Rybka's excited about. It's this F6 square, because now white takes the time to play a quiet move, queen F4, and black would be in trouble, because there's no like knight D7, the bishop's blocking that D7 to protect F6. So black would be in real trouble here in this variation. I didn't see this variation or the real problem with the E7 square. So bishop E2 here, and it's the diagonal now and the dark squares generally which would give white an advantage